Okay, took 3 hours to find the footage that was missing in this weekend's episode. 3 hours. I was going through the project file and I got up to where we were hiking, and then I clicked to the next, and I was wondering why it skipped to kind of toward the end of the episode. And then I thought, that's kind of weird. Well, I must use a different SD chip. And I said to Trish, did we switch SD chips while we were on that hike? She said, no, I don't think so. I don't think so either. 3 hours until I finally figured out what had happened, and that's what I wanted to share with you. And so if you're watching this video, you probably, you either have a YouTube channel, or you make some videos, or maybe you're a photographer, you understand SD cards and external hard drives, and you'd like to avoid the problem that we had. So I want to share that with you. And by the way, in the YouTube course, I go into far more detail as to how I manage our data to avoid something like this. And you know what? Traveling for 2.5 years now, and making a video every Sunday and having this never happen, the system is working, and I use a label maker like this, and I label each external hard drive accordingly. And then I open up the file, and I open it up in a big view so I can see all the files and all the footage and locations and dates. And then I take a screenshot of that. And then I name that screenshot the same name as, season 3, number 2. And so that way, if we ever do like a flashback, I can just go into my computer and I can look for the files by the screenshot. And then I know which of these to go grab for the flashback. So that's just a little quick tip on that, which I talked about in the course. But this was not an external hard drive issue, maybe a little bit. So this is the chip that I use for the Canon. It's a PNY 128 gig chip that writes to disk about 95 megabytes per second. And when I was moving all the data from this chip over to one of these external hard drives, it said it was going to take 5.5 hours to copy the data over, which is, it normally takes maybe a half hour tops. So I knew that there was a problem, and I didn't necessarily know how to fix it, because I actually canceled it and I copied it again and I moved the data and said 5.5 hours. So it was concerning, to say the least, when this happened, but I didn't quite know what to do. So I ended up going to bed, waking up the next morning. I woke up the next morning and it still had a half hour to go. It finished writing the data, but I was crazy skeptical. I wasn't sure exactly what was going on. And so I ended up checking the beginning, the starting of the files, and the ending of the files, and I made sure all the files were there, but evidently I missed 120 files that never wrote to the external hard drive. And I ended up clearing this chip, which was my first mistake, and then we ended up going on another trip. And the reason I had to clear this chip is because I have these 64 gig chips that are microchips in these sleeves. I had one dedicated to the Mavic Pro, I had one dedicated to the GoPro Session, I had one dedicated to the GoPro Hero, I had this in the Canon, and then I had another 16 gig chip dedicated to the T5i for the telescopic. So I was out of cards, which I'm going to buy some more backup cards in case this ever happens. So what ended up happening is I've since learned that when these external hard drives, and presumably any external hard drive, when they reach their max capacity, they start writing to disk really slow. And I believe that this was at about 1.7, 1.8 terabytes, and it's 2 terabytes. So I was moving 128 gigs to it. And so when these start getting at max capacity, they move very slow. And I've now since keep an eye on these so that when they get up to about 1.7 terabytes, I call it quits, and that's when I label it and I switch out. I don't try to max these things out at all. Just like a computer, you want to leave a fair amount of space. So we burn through about 1 terabyte per month. This is a 2 terabyte hard drive, so every other month I'm buying a new one and switching. And when I'm in those in-between months, that's when I have 2 of these connected to my laptop, because I have some footage here and some footage over there, so it's kind of a pain. So, but now that's my rule. I don't max these things out, and hopefully I don't have this situation again. The other solution I'm going to do is I'm going to get these 64 gig chips that are made by SanDisk, are very good chips. And on Amazon, they're affordable. And they're the microchips, they're the gold chips that write to disk fast enough for 60 frames per second. They can fit into the GoPro, they can fit into the DJI Mavic, and they can go into the sleeve, and I can use them as a backup for the Canon. So I have another one of these that I'm going to be ordering, just in case I was in that situation again. I could just simply say, you know what, I'm going to solve this later, put a pause, get a different chip, and then go on out, and then take my time. And that's probably the biggest thing, the biggest recommendation I have for any creator or photographer, and that is, when in doubt, go very, very slow. and have the time. I was kind of in a hurry because we had to get going, and so that's the other part of the problem with this. Now, all the things we learned from our YouTube experiences we share in our YouTube course, but for this particular lesson learned, I wanted to share it with everybody because you don't have to have a YouTube channel to want to avoid an SD card or external hard drive issue. But if you've ever considered creating a channel or just making videos for your friends and family, I will say, and you've heard Trish and I say this before, we get even more out of our journey because we share the adventure and because we're looking at everything through a lens. And although it was a little stressful this week, overall we're so grateful that we have a channel and we have kind of a purpose for our travel. So that's it for this video. There's more information down below, and we'll catch you next Sunday.